What would you do if your husband chose another woman while you were giving birth to his child, alone? Emily Carter's world shatters, but her journey from betrayal to strength will leave you breathless. This is a story of heartbreak, redemption, and the fierce power of a mother's love. You won't believe how it ends. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories like this one. The city of Chicago glowed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Carter penthouse, each light in the skyline blinking like a distant promise. Emily Carter, 8 months pregnant, stood barefoot on the cool marble floor, one hand resting on the curve of her belly, the other holding a cup of lukewarm chamomile tea. The apartment, once full of laughter and clinking wine glasses, now echoed with a quiet too loud to ignore. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt accusatory, like the walls had grown ears. She glanced at the sleek black clock on the wall. 10:47 p.m. Derek still hadn't come home. He'd texted earlier. Investor meeting ran long. Don't wait up. That was it. No call, no check-in, no how's the baby, not even a heart emoji. Just business, as always. Emily exhaled slowly, rubbing her belly in slow circles. "It's okay, baby girl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Mommy's here. You're not alone." She shuffled to the living room and sank into the cream-colored sectional couch, wrapping herself in the soft gray throw Derek had bought during their trip to Aspen last winter. Back when he was still attentive, back when she still believed in the myth of their perfect marriage. The TV played softly, some rerun of a cooking show she wasn't watching. Her eyes flicked to her phone again, willing it to light up. Nothing. Lately, silence had become a language between them, one filled with unspoken questions and answers she was too scared to confront. She used to dismiss the late nights, the vague client dinners, the unreturned calls. Derek was a tech entrepreneur, after all. That came with erratic hours, networking events, and unpredictable flights. He always said, "This is for us, Em, for our future." And she believed him. Until she didn't. 2 weeks ago, she'd found a receipt in his suit pocket from a restaurant they'd never visited together. La Rousseau, an elite French spot known for its couples-only tasting menus and dim candlelit corners. The date on the receipt? The same night he said he was in San Francisco. She'd stared at the paper for an hour before shoving it in the bottom drawer of her vanity, next to the box of pregnancy journals she no longer had the heart to write in. Emily had always been intuitive. She didn't need hard proof to know something had shifted. There were moments, a whisper of unfamiliar perfume on his collar, the way his gaze flickered when she asked how his day was. The warmth in his voice had cooled, replaced by polite detachment. But tonight felt like a turning point. Their anniversary. 3 years ago, they'd stood on a beach in Maui, toes in the sand, wind in her veil, swearing forever beneath a setting sun. He had kissed her like she was his world, promised to cherish her, to protect her, to never leave her feeling like she was second best. And now, on the night that was supposed to mark another year of promises kept, he hadn't even remembered. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't bother wiping it away. The front door stayed closed. The city kept glowing. At some point, she must have dozed off. She woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. Her heart leapt, but it wasn't Derek. It was Nina Thompson, her best friend since college. Loyal to a fault and never afraid to speak her mind. Emily swiped to answer. "Hey," she said, voice groggy. "Please tell me you're not still waiting for him. Nina's voice came through sharp and incredulous. Emily swallowed. It's fine. He's busy. It's your anniversary, Em. Busy isn't an excuse. Busy is a cover. There was a pause. Emily pressed the phone tighter to her ear. I didn't want to do this, Nina said, her voice softening. But I need you to look at something. Emily's heart sank. What is it? I'm sending you a photo. Just look. The message came through immediately. Emily tapped it open. Her breath caught. The image was crisp, clearly taken from someone's Instagram story. It showed Derek, standing at the bar of a rooftop lounge, a glass of scotch in hand, and Vanessa Loring beside him. The infamous Vanessa. Flawless, statuesque, always in black. She leaned into him, her manicured hand resting on his chest like it belonged there. The caption read, Power couple alert. Emily couldn't move, couldn't think. Em? Nina's voice was gentle now. You still there? I'm here, she whispered, her fingers trembling around the phone. I'm sorry, Nina said. I didn't know until tonight, but people are talking. That woman, Vanessa, she's not just an investor. They've been spotted at events together for weeks. Emily felt cold. Not the physical kind, but the kind that crawls up your spine when you realize the life you thought was solid has begun to crumble beneath you. She ended the call, dropped the phone onto the couch, and stood, her legs unsteady beneath the weight of her belly. And her heart. She walked to the kitchen on autopilot, opened the cabinet and reached for the baby's ultrasound photo taped to the inside of the pantry door. She had put it there months ago as a daily reminder of the life growing inside her, a tiny promise of hope. Staring at it now, she whispered, I won't let this destroy us. I won't let him take away what we have. And yet, even as she said it, the photo of Derek with another woman burned behind her eyelids. She turned out the lights and walked to the bedroom, each step heavy with disbelief. When she slid beneath the covers, the sheets on his side of the bed were cold. Sleep didn't come easily. Her mind raced. Flashes of past conversations, moments when she doubted herself, nights when she blamed her own insecurities. But this wasn't paranoia. This was betrayal. In the quiet darkness, her baby kicked again. Strong. Like a signal. I hear you, Emily murmured. I hear you loud and clear. The next morning she woke early, made herself oatmeal she didn't eat, and sat by the window, watching the sunrise paint the skyline in amber light. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Derek. 7:18 a.m. Didn't want to wake you. Meeting early, back late. Love you. Emily stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't reply. Instead, she opened a new browser tab. Private investigators in Chicago. She clicked on the first one with good reviews. Cameron and Ross Investigative Services. Her hands were shaking, but she typed anyway. Hello. My name is Emily Carter. I believe my husband is cheating on me. I need to know the truth before I bring my daughter into this world. She hit send. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she'd taken a step toward something real. Something solid. The truth. That evening, Derek returned around 11 p.m., loosening his tie and setting down his briefcase like everything was normal. Emily sat in the armchair, a book open on her lap, unread. Hey, he said casually, brushing a kiss against her cheek that she didn't return. Crazy day. Investor dinner? She asked coolly. He nodded, shrugging off his blazer. long one. Vanessa's trying to bring in some European backers. You know how these things go." Emily smiled faintly. "I'm sure I do." He didn't notice her tone. Or if he did, he ignored it. He went to the bathroom, and Emily remained still, staring at the blank TV screen. Her reflection stared back at her, and for the first time she didn't look lost. She looked like someone ready. She looked like a woman who had finally opened her eyes. In the distance, a siren wailed. Her baby moved again, a flutter just beneath her ribs. Emily placed her hand there and whispered, "We're going to be okay, no matter what happens next." And somewhere deep inside, she knew. It was true. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a sharp edge that morning, slicing through the gaps in the high-rise buildings of downtown Chicago as Emily Carter stepped out of the therapist's office. Her wool coat barely held the chill at bay, but she hardly noticed. Her mind wasn't on the weather. It wasn't even on the tightness in her back or the swelling in her ankles, side effects of being 34 weeks pregnant. Her thoughts were tangled in the image that still burned in her mind. Derek at the rooftop lounge, with Vanessa's hand resting like a brand on his chest. She should have confronted him that night. Instead, she had stared at him across their massive glass dining table, watching him scroll through emails while sipping his morning espresso. He looked up once, gave her a casual smile, and said, "You okay, Em? You look tired." She wanted to scream, wanted to fling her phone onto the marble table and demand answers. But the words had stuck in her throat, smothered by the need to appear composed, by the fear of what he might say if she gave him the chance. So she had nodded. Didn't sleep much. Now, with her hands buried deep in her coat pockets and her heart weighed down by doubt, she headed to Nina's apartment, the one place that still felt safe. The door opened before she even knocked. Nina stood there in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, holding a steaming mug of coffee in one hand and looking at her friend with eyes full of concern. "You didn't sleep again, did you?" she asked. Emily shook her head and stepped inside, grateful for the warmth. "I had nightmares. Again." Nina handed her the coffee, leading her into the cozy living room where sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains and everything smelled faintly of cinnamon. Emily sank onto the couch, pulling her legs up under her like she used to in college. "I keep thinking I'm overreacting," she admitted. "That maybe it was just a picture, maybe he was caught at a bad angle, maybe Vanessa was leaning in and it meant nothing." "You're not crazy, Em," Nina said firmly. "That wasn't just a bad angle. She looked like she owned him." Emily flinched at the phrasing. "I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. The way he keeps disappearing at night. The perfume on his shirt. The lies. It's like I've been living in this beautiful illusion." "I didn't want to say anything before," Nina said carefully, "but I've been hearing things too. People are whispering, tech bloggers, investors. Vanessa Loring isn't just some passive shareholder. She's been at every event, every launch. She's even rumored to be staying in a downtown condo owned by Carter Tech." Emily felt her breath catch. "I didn't know that. I found out this morning. My friend Ella works for the leasing office at that building. Vanessa's name isn't on the lease, but Derek's is." Emily closed her eyes. For a moment, everything went quiet except the sound of her pulse pounding in her ears. The pieces were clicking together now, falling into place with terrifying clarity. "Do you still have the PI's number?" she asked quietly. Nina reached into her phone, scrolled, then scribbled the number on a notepad. "Victor Reyes. He's discreet, efficient. He helped my cousin during her divorce. Got pictures, texts, the whole thing. Emily stared at the number. Her hands trembled slightly, but she gripped the paper like a lifeline. I can't live like this anymore. I need to know for sure. Nina squeezed her hand. You're doing the right thing. That evening, Emily waited until the lights in the penthouse dimmed and Derek retreated to his office to make his nightly calls, or whatever it was he did behind that frosted glass door. She locked herself in the guest bedroom, dialed the number, and waited. Victor Reyes, came a deep, calm voice on the other end. She introduced herself quietly, explained her situation. Her voice cracked once when she mentioned the baby. I understand, Victor said. You're not alone. Let's meet tomorrow morning. I'll explain how we proceed and what I'll need from you. The next day, she met Victor at a quiet cafe in Lincoln Park. He was in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair, and a look in his eyes that said he'd seen the worst of people and still chose to help. He asked her for dates, times, schedules, anything that could help track Derek's movements. Emily handed him a file she'd compiled in a fit of clarity the night before. Screenshots, receipts, notes on Derek's erratic comings and goings. Victor flipped through the pages, nodding slowly. We'll start surveillance tonight. Back at home, Derek was unusually attentive. He kissed her forehead, asked about the baby's kicks, even offered to order dinner. Mexican? He asked. That place you love, Rosita's? Emily blinked. Sure, that'd be nice. But even as she smiled, her heart beat with suspicion. What was this sudden warmth? Guilt? An attempt to throw her off? Over the next 3 days, she played the role of the loving wife while Victor sent her updates in cryptic texts. Activity logged. Patterns emerging. More soon. Derek came home late each night, smelling of whiskey and perfume and secrets. Emily would lie in bed pretending to be asleep, her belly heavy, her body aching, her heart twisting with each minute he was gone. On the 5th day, Victor called. His tone was somber. I think you should come see what we've got, he said. It's conclusive. Emily met him at the same cafe. This time he had a manila envelope in hand. Her fingers shook as she opened it. The first photo was of Derek and Vanessa leaving a spa, her arm hooked through his, both of them laughing. The next, them at an upscale restaurant, seated at a private booth. The last, the most damning, a shot of them at a luxury condo's rooftop patio. Derek was leaning in, kissing Vanessa's neck. Her eyes were closed. His hands were on her waist. Emily couldn't breathe. She closed the envelope and stared out the window at the crowded sidewalk. Mothers pushing strollers, couples holding hands, lives moving forward. I'm so sorry, Victor said gently. You don't owe me a response right now. Just know you have the truth now. Emily nodded, her throat raw. Thank you. I needed to see it, even if it broke me. That night, she didn't wait for Derek to walk in. She was waiting at the kitchen island, the envelope placed squarely on the marble countertop like a landmine. When he stepped through the door, loosening his tie and dropping his keys, he froze the moment he saw her. Hey, he said slowly. You're up. Long day, she asked, voice calm, almost eerily so. He nodded. Exhausting. Investor dinner again? He hesitated. Yeah. Long meeting with some European clients. Emily slid the envelope across the counter. What's this? Open it. Derek's jaw tightened. He didn't move. I said open it, Derek. He picked it up, flipped the clasp, and pulled out the photos. his face changed. First confusion, then realization, then dread. "This isn't what it looks like," he started. Emily stood. "Don't insult me. I can explain. You were supposed to be building our life, not building it with someone else." "It started out as business," he said, voice rising. "Vanessa has connections. She wanted more, and I let things get out of hand. I didn't mean for it to happen like this." Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You didn't mean to cheat on your pregnant wife." He looked away. "I want a decision," she said, her voice steel. "Tonight. Her or us." Derek stepped forward. "Emily, please." "No, don't touch me." She wrapped her arms protectively around her belly. "This baby deserves better. I deserve better." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the kitchen, the envelope still in his hands. Back in her bedroom, she closed the door and finally let herself cry. Deep, shaking sobs that echoed off the walls. But somewhere between the tears and the pain, something inside her shifted, hardened. She had faced the truth. She had demanded clarity. Now, she had a choice of her own to make. And this time, she would make it not for him, but for herself and the child who had already given her more strength than she ever knew she had. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of the Carter penthouse, painting the glass with thin streaks of silver. Inside, Emily sat in the nursery, arms wrapped around her belly as if shielding her unborn child from the chaos unraveling just beyond the door. The manila envelope from Victor lay on the floor beside her, its contents spilled like the aftermath of a storm. Photos, time-stamped documents, indisputable proof that her husband was not only unfaithful, but deeply entangled in a lie she had naively chosen not to see until now. She rocked slowly in the cream-colored glider, the soft creak of wood beneath her adding rhythm to her thoughts. The baby kicked gently, as if responding to her tension. "I know, sweetheart," she whispered, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I feel it too." Down the hall, the sound of the front door opening sliced through the silence. She didn't move. She didn't call his name. Derek's footsteps echoed across the hardwood floors, the faint shuffle of shoes, the familiar clink of keys dropped into the silver bowl on the console table, a pause, and then the quiet thud of his briefcase set down. Emily listened, not to the sounds, but to the energy. He always came in with a kind of self-assured hum, like he belonged to the world and the world owed him something. But tonight there was hesitation in his step. He knew. "Emily?" he called out, his voice echoing unnaturally in the open space. She didn't answer. Instead, she waited, letting him come to her. When he finally pushed open the nursery door, his gaze caught on her immediately, and then dropped to the photos scattered across the floor. The change in his face was instantaneous. His mask of charisma faltered. His eyes darkened, jaw tightening with the subtle panic of a man who knows he's been caught, not just in a mistake, but in a betrayal. She looked up, voice steady but quiet. "You lied to me." He stepped into the room slowly, like crossing some invisible threshold. "Emily, No," she cut in sharply. Don't start with an excuse. You don't get to explain away this with another investor dinner or late meeting." He knelt to pick up one of the photos, holding it like it might burn his fingers. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Emily's laugh was hollow. "You didn't want me to find out at all." He didn't respond, and that silence, more than anything, confirmed what she already knew. "So what is she?" she asked, rising to her feet, her body slow and aching from the weight she carried. Your business partner? Your investor? Or your backup life in case this one got too real? She's not, he began, but the words caught in his throat. It started as business, I swear. She showed interest in the platform during the tech summit last year. Her father's foundation could open doors we've never dreamed of. It was supposed to be clean, just funding, meetings, strategy. Emily's voice shook with incredulity. You don't kiss your investors in private rooftop gardens, Derek. I know. He looked at her then, eyes rimmed with regret. I know I messed up. I got in too deep, and by the time I realized it, I didn't know how to get out without losing everything. She stared at him, her breath unsteady. Everything? You mean the company, the image, your empire? He hesitated before nodding. Yes. Her chest heaved. And what about me, about our baby? What do we count as? Collateral? No, he said quickly, stepping forward. God, no. I love you, Em. I never stop. She stepped back. You don't betray someone you love, Derek. You don't abandon them when they're pregnant. You don't lie to their face night after night while building a second life down the street. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. He raked a hand through his hair and looked around the nursery. At the pale yellow walls, the mobile of stars hanging above the crib, the tiny stuffed giraffe Emily had picked out during her second trimester. It's just, everything was moving so fast, he muttered. The deals, the money, the pressure. I felt like I was finally building something big enough to last. You already had something lasting, she said bitterly, and you threw it away, for convenience dressed as ambition. He looked at her then with a pain she wasn't sure was for her or for himself. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. You already did. The words hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Still, he tried. Let me fix this. I'll cut ties with her. I'll pull out of the deal. Emily's brow arched. You said it yourself. Cutting ties would cost you everything. Are you really willing to do that? His silence was his answer. She nodded, her face hardening. Then we're done. A long, tortured pause filled the room. I'm not saying forever, she added quietly, but right now, I need space, and you need to figure out if you're the man who meant those vows or the man who used them as cover. He nodded slowly. I'll stay at the condo for now. As he left the nursery, Emily sank back into the chair, her body collapsing under the weight of everything she'd just done. Her hands went instinctively to her stomach, feeling the baby kick again. Strong, urgent. You deserve better than confusion, she whispered, her voice cracking, and I'll make sure you get it. The next morning, the penthouse felt different, lighter in a way. Empty, yes, but not hollow. Emily moved through the rooms with a new kind of clarity. Her heart still ached, her eyes still welled up at random moments, but there was strength now, too. Real, pulsing, unyielding. Victor called just after noon. I wanted to check in, see how you were holding up. I'm okay, Emily said. Strangely, okay. I've seen a lot of reactions over the years, he said. But you handled it with dignity. Most people fall apart. You stood your ground. Emily managed a small smile. I had to. For her. Victor paused. If you need anything else, just say the word. She thanked him and hung up, then spent the afternoon sorting through the baby's closet. Tiny onesies, pastel blankets, soft little shoes with no purpose other than being adorable. Each item felt like a declaration. Life continues. Love continues, even when everything else falls apart. That evening, she took a long bath, allowing herself to fully feel the ache that still lingered in her chest. She cried, not just for Derek, but for the life she thought she had, for the trust that shattered, for the home that didn't feel like home anymore. But then, as she wrapped herself in a towel and walked back into the bedroom, her phone buzzed. A message from Nina. "Whatever happens next, I'm with you. Always. And your little girl will be surrounded by love. Promise." Emily replied with a simple heart, then looked around the room. The dimmed lamp, the half-packed hospital bag by the dresser, the faint lullaby playing from the sound machine. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if Derek would truly follow through on his promise to walk away from Vanessa. She didn't know if forgiveness was even possible, much less trust. But she knew one thing with crystal clarity. She was not broken, not beaten. She was still standing. And with every beat of her heart, every breath she drew, she was becoming the kind of mother who would teach her daughter what strength really looked like. The days that followed Derek's departure blurred into a haze of half-slept nights and long, quiet mornings. Emily Carter moved through the penthouse as if it were a stranger's home, a place once filled with dreams, now echoing with silence and the hum of what could have been. Each room carried a ghost of their love. The couch where they'd planned the nursery, the kitchen counter where he'd once lifted her onto the granite and kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. All of it felt distant now, like flickers from someone else's life. She tried to focus on the baby. Nesting became her form of therapy. She folded and refolded tiny onesies, rearranged diapers by size and scent, washed the pale pink crib sheets 3 times even though they were already clean. Anything to avoid the thoughts that crept in when the house got too still, too dark. And yet, no matter how hard she tried, the ache lingered. It lived in the back of her throat, in the pit of her stomach, in the shadows under her eyes. Derek hadn't tried to contact her since the night of the confrontation. Not even a text, not even to ask how the baby was. That silence, more than the affair, pierced her the most. He had always been selfish, yes, ambitious, obsessed with legacy, but she never imagined he would disappear so completely in her most vulnerable moments. Her only anchor was Nina, who called every day like clockwork, sometimes just to talk her through contractions that fizzled out after 10 minutes, or to remind her to drink water and breathe. One Thursday evening, the city buzzed beneath a watercolor sunset. Emily was in the nursery again, rocking in the chair with a book she wasn't really reading. Her phone buzzed beside her. "Nina, thought you might want to see this. I'm sorry." Emily's stomach twisted. She hesitated, then tapped on the message. It was a screenshot from a story posted by one of the city's trendiest socialites. The image was crisp, lit by neon and champagne. Derek stood on the rooftop patio of the Glass House, one of Chicago's most exclusive lounges. His hand was on Vanessa's waist. She leaned into him like she belonged there. The caption read, "Power players back in action. Derek Carter and Vanessa Loring lighting up the night again." Emily stared at the photo. A pressure building in her chest so tight it felt like her ribs might snap. She opened her texts, typed, deleted. Then she typed again. "You said you were done with her. You said you'd end it. Instead, you're out at nightclubs with her while I'm here preparing to give birth to our daughter. Alone." She hit send. Watch the message go from delivered to silence. 10 minutes passed. Then an hour. No reply. Emily set the phone down on the nightstand and sat at the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. She could hear the heartbeat of her daughter in her own pulse, thudding with fury, heartbreak, and something deeper. Resolve. That night, she barely slept. She lay curled on her side, cradling her stomach, as tears slipped down her cheeks into the pillow. By dawn, her mind was made up. She wouldn't text him again, she wouldn't wait by the door, she wouldn't hope. If he didn't come back now, he never would. By the weekend, Emily tried to pretend it was just another normal Saturday. She made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, played her Peaceful Birth playlist on repeat. But her body felt different. Heavier. Slower. By mid-afternoon, the sun blazed against the glass windows and the air felt unusually thick. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, flipping through a parenting book to distract herself, and then, without warning, she felt a deep cramp roll through her abdomen, low and strong. She gasped, clutching the edge of the mattress. A second later, a warm gush of fluid spilled onto the floor. She froze. Her water had broken. Panic shot through her like electricity. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers and dialed Derek's number. It rang once, twice. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. She texted, "Water broke. Going into labor. Please answer." Nothing. Emily's chest heaved, her heart racing. A contraction slammed into her like a freight train, pulling a cry from her lips. She dialed Nina. "Hey, Em." "Nina," she choked out. "It's happening. She's coming. Derek's not answering. I don't know what to do." Nina didn't hesitate. "I'm calling a car right now. I'll be there in 10 minutes. You're not doing this alone, I promise." Emily sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her belly, trying to remember the breathing techniques she'd learned but never practiced enough. Each contraction came closer than the last, tearing through her with increasing strength. By the time Nina arrived, she was white-knuckling the armrest, tears pouring down her face, sweat slicking her hairline. They got into the car, the driver weaving through traffic as Nina held Emily's hand and whispered, "You've got this. Just hold on. We're almost there." At the hospital, the nurses were quick, their movements efficient, their voices calm. Emily was wheeled into triage, her legs shaking, her breaths ragged. Nina stayed close, refusing to leave her side for even a second. "Any support person coming?" a nurse asked, strapping a monitor around Emily's belly. "My husband," Emily said, voice weak. "He should be here." But she knew he wouldn't be. Time blurred. The fluorescent lights above seemed to pulse with every wave of pain. Dr. Hastings arrived, her warm hands reassuring as she checked Emily's progress. 8 centimeters. We're moving fast, Emily. You're doing great." Emily gritted her teeth through another contraction, Nina counting her through it. Inhale, 2, 3, exhale, 2, 3. "Where is he?" Emily whispered between clenched teeth. "He should be here." Nina's phone buzzed. She checked it, her face darkening. Then she looked at Emily, hesitating. "What?" Emily gasped. "He's here, Derek, but—" She swallowed. "He's with Vanessa. She had some kind of emergency. They're in the same hospital." Emily stared at her, stunned. "You're kidding." Nina shook her head, her voice thick with fury. "I wish I was." A sob tore from Emily's throat, primal and full of pain. "He's in this building, and he's not with me. I'm not going anywhere. Nina said, wrapping her arms around her. "We're bringing this baby into the world together." In the delivery room, the pain became unbearable, folding her in half, clawing through her body. Nurses shouted numbers. Dr. Hastings called for more towels. The fetal monitor beeped wildly. Emily screamed into the pillow, her cries raw and feral. Push, push again. She gave everything. Every ounce of pain, every bit of heartbreak, every single scream was a release of everything Derek had ever taken from her. And finally, a cry pierced the air. "It's a girl," Dr. Hastings announced. They placed the warm, wailing baby on Emily's chest. In that moment, everything fell away. The betrayal, the fear, the silence. All that remained was love. Deep, unshakable, overwhelming love. Emily looked down at her daughter, tiny and perfect, and whispered through tears, "You're not alone. I've got you." Minutes later, the door burst open. Derek stood there, his face pale, collar stained, his eyes wide with panic. "Emily, are you okay? I came as soon as I—" Nina stepped between them. "You've got some nerve." "I didn't know it would happen so fast," he said, stepping forward. Emily looked up at him, her face streaked with sweat and tears. She clutched her daughter tighter. "You weren't here," she said flatly. "You were with her." She had a medical emergency. I thought labor would take longer. And I thought I could count on you." The room fell silent, except for the quiet coo of the newborn. "I don't want to hear excuses," she whispered. "Not now. Maybe not ever." Derek stood frozen, guilt written across his face. The weight of his choices had finally arrived, crying in the arms of the woman he had abandoned. And for the first time, it wasn't Emily who was breaking, it was him. The quiet hum of the hospital monitors was broken only by the soft, steady breaths of Emily Carter as she lay in the recovery room, cradling her newborn daughter against her chest. The baby's tiny body radiated warmth, her face nestled close to Emily's heart, as if she already knew where she belonged. Outside, the first light of morning seeped through the slats of the window blinds, casting thin golden stripes across the blanket that swaddled them both. Emily had named her daughter Lily, short, delicate, and strong, just like the flower that bloomed even in the harshest of soil, just like her. Every inch of Emily's body ached. The pain from labor still throbbed deep in her hips, her muscles tight and sore from hours of pushing. But none of that mattered. Not now. Not with Lily in her arms. The baby let out a soft sigh, her tiny hand curling into a fist as she snuggled closer, and Emily's chest tightened with a rush of love so intense it nearly stole her breath. Nina sat nearby, bleary-eyed but alert, watching over both of them like a guardian angel. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, lighting up with another message, but she didn't reach for it. "He's still in the hospital," she said quietly, reading Emily's mind. Emily didn't respond. She was too exhausted to cry, too emotionally hollow to scream, and too proud to beg. She had already given birth alone. She had already survived the worst. Nothing Derek did now could undo that. A nurse entered softly, her scrubs whispering against the floor. "How are we feeling, Mama?" Emily managed a tired smile. "Still breathing." The nurse laughed gently. "That's half the battle. I'll give you a little more time with your daughter before we check your vitals again." When she left, the room slipped back into silence. Nina finally leaned forward, her voice tentative. Do you want me to tell him to leave? He's still down the hall. Keeps asking the front desk if you're ready for visitors. Emily looked down at Lily. The baby stirred, hiccuped, then settled. No, she whispered. Let him come. I need to see his face when he realizes what he missed. It was nearly an hour later when the door opened. Derek stepped in quietly, the scent of coffee and hospital antiseptic clinging to his clothes. His eyes darted first to Emily, then to the baby in her arms. His lips parted, but no words came out. Emily looked up at him with a cold calmness. She didn't yell. She didn't weep. She simply stared. She's beautiful, he finally said, taking a slow step forward. You did it. You both did. Emily glanced down at her daughter. I did it. The correction landed like a slap. Derek swallowed hard. I didn't know it would happen so quickly. Vanessa collapsed during brunch and... Emily's head snapped up. Don't say her name. He flinched. I'm sorry. You should be, she said quietly. I screamed through contractions without you. I bled without you. I thought I was going to pass out, and when I opened my eyes between pushes, the only face I saw was Nina's. Derek dropped into the chair beside the bed, rubbing a hand across his face. I messed up, he admitted, more than once, and I don't expect you to forgive me, not now. Maybe, not ever. Emily shifted Lily gently, pressing a kiss to her daughter's soft temple. I'm not interested in apologies, she said, voice low. I'm interested in answers. What were you doing with her when I was begging you to come, when my messages were flooding your phone? Derek leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Vanessa had some kind of infection. They thought it was her appendix. She called me crying. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. You came for her, Emily said flatly, and not for us. I didn't think labor would move that fast. Stop! Her voice cracked, but she held her ground. You didn't come because you didn't want to choose. You stayed with her because you thought she was the higher priority, and that tells me everything I need to know. He looked up at her, desperation bleeding into his expression. I wanted to be here. I swear I did. But you weren't, she said, her eyes narrowing. And that's the part I'll never forget. Lily stirred again, her mouth rooting blindly. Emily shifted her to her breast and let her latch, the instinctual rhythm of feeding grounding her as much as it did the baby. Derek watched, awestruck and silent. She doesn't know you, Emily said, not unkindly. Not yet. That can change, but it'll be on my terms. He nodded. Whatever you need. I want to fix this. You can't fix it, she replied. You can only prove you've changed, and that takes time. So much time. A nurse peeked in then, checking vitals and updating the monitor. Derek stood awkwardly to the side, eyes on the floor. When they were alone again, Nina touched Emily's shoulder gently. Do you want me to give you two some space? Emily hesitated, then shook her head. Not yet? The next 2 days passed in a strange limbo. Derek visited, but not often. He sat in the chair beside the bed, offered to change a diaper, brought coffee that went untouched. Emily let him hold Lily once, but only briefly. She watched him like a hawk, every move under silent scrutiny. There were no dramatic fights, no tears, just the quiet ache of distance built by disappointment. Lily, meanwhile, flourished. Her eyes opened more each hour, her little fists punching the air as if demanding her place in the world. Emily watched her with awe and terror, knowing that everything had changed. that this tiny human depended on her now, for everything. The hospital discharged her on the third day. Derek offered to carry the car seat, to call the valet, to do anything. Emily accepted his help, but said little. Back at the penthouse, it all felt surreal. The same plush rugs, the same skyline view, but everything else was different. Derek lingered by the front door, unsure if he should leave or stay. Emily lifted Lily from her car seat. "We'll be in the nursery." She walked away without looking back. That night, she sat in the glider, watching the stars flicker through the nursery window, her daughter sleeping soundly in her arms. And for the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to feel both grief and gratitude. Grief for the love she had lost. Gratitude for the love she had gained. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never again wait for someone to choose her, because from now on, she would choose herself and her daughter. Always. The days after Lily's arrival felt like slow-moving shadows, stretching long and heavy across every room of the Carter penthouse. Emily was no stranger to exhaustion, but this was something else entirely. A constant bone-deep fatigue, not just from the sleepless nights and diaper changes, but from the emotional bruises that had yet to fade. Her body healed faster than her heart. The physical pain from labor dulled within days, but the ache in her chest remained sharp, raw, and steady. Derek came and went. He tried to keep his distance, offering help only when she asked. He slept in the guest bedroom now, his presence a ghostly echo of the life they once shared. Some mornings he brought her breakfast without saying a word. Scrambled eggs and toast, coffee the way she liked it, orange juice with a straw. But Emily barely touched the food. She was polite, always polite, thanking him with a nod, but her eyes were guarded, lips pressed thin like a dam holding back everything unsaid. At night, when Lily cried, Emily was always the first to respond. Even when Derek heard the wailing from down the hall, even when he stood in the doorway half asleep with guilt in his eyes, she never asked for help. She didn't trust him enough yet to hand her daughter over. One morning, as the city hummed awake beyond the glass windows, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, Lily sleeping against her chest in a soft wrap. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her OB-GYN, Dr. Hastings. Reminder, postpartum check-in tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Please confirm your support person for transport. Emily stared at the screen, then typed a quick response. I'll come alone. Thanks, Dr. H. She placed the phone back down and looked at Lily's tiny face, peaceful and unaware of the emotional storm her mother was navigating. Just you and me, baby girl, Emily whispered. That afternoon, she walked into the nursery and found Derek standing by the crib, his fingers trailing along the wooden railing. He turned when he heard her enter, eyes full of hesitation. I set up the monitor, he said, and the nightlight. I figured, thanks, she replied softly, cradling Lily a little tighter. I wanted to ask. He shifted his weight, the words catching in his throat. Would it be okay if I took Lily for a walk in the stroller later? Just around the block, let you nap. Emily stared at him, then down at Lily. I'm not ready for that yet, she said, not unkindly. I need to be with her. Derek nodded, his jaw tightening. Of course. He left the room a moment later, shoulders slumped, as if the rejection was another weight he'd willingly carry. Later that night, Emily stood in the kitchen warming a bottle, while Lily fussed quietly in the bassinet. The soft hum of white noise played from the corner speaker, and the city lights outside flickered like fireflies. Derek emerged from the hallway, a tired look in his eyes. "Do you want me to feed her?" he asked, gesturing to the bottle in her hand. Emily hesitated. "I've got it." But as she turned to pick Lily up, a sudden jolt of pain shot through her back. She winced, nearly stumbling. Derek was by her side in seconds. "Emily, I'm fine," she said quickly, but her face betrayed the truth. "Let me," he said, his voice lower now, almost pleading. She looked into his eyes and saw no trace of arrogance or deflection, only quiet remorse and a desperate hunger to do something right. "Just one thing." She handed him the bottle. Derek moved slowly, carefully scooping Lily up and cradling her with a tenderness that stunned Emily into silence. He sat down on the couch, shifting the baby into his arm as he brought the bottle to her lips. Lily latched instinctively, her cries fading into small, contented gulps. Emily sat across from them, arms folded loosely over her stomach, watching him. "She looks like you," he murmured. "She has your mouth," Emily replied. Silence stretched between them, soft and uncertain. "I'm trying," Derek said suddenly. "I know I was the last person to deserve a second chance, but I'm trying. I ended things with Vanessa." Emily didn't respond. "I told her I couldn't keep living a lie," he continued, "that if she wanted to pull her investment, so be it. She threatened lawsuits, said she had enough dirt on me to make sure I'd never build anything again." That got Emily's attention. "What kind of dirt?" Derek looked ashamed. "Emails, texts. She thinks she owns part of the company, even though nothing was formalized. She's bluffing, but it could still hurt. Reputationally, financially." He paused. "I walked anyway." Emily blinked, trying to absorb what that meant. "She's really out of the picture?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "It cost me almost everything. But I meant what I said at the hospital. I want to fix this." She stared at him for a long moment. "It's not just about ending the affair. It's about rebuilding something that may never be what it was. You left me when I was most vulnerable, Derek. That doesn't just go away." He nodded, eyes downcast. I know I hurt you in a way that's hard to come back from. But if there's even a sliver of hope, I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood, walked over to the couch, and gently took Lily back into her arms. "Start by being here," she said, turning away. "Not just physically, but emotionally." The next few days were cautious. Derek stayed home more, clearing meetings, turning down travel. Emily noticed the change, but she also didn't let it sway her too quickly. Trust wasn't something to be gifted. It had to be rebuilt, brick by brick. He helped with night feedings, cooked breakfast, cleaned bottles. He booked a therapy session and asked if she'd come with him. She hesitated for a long time before finally saying yes. The therapy office was warm and softly lit, the kind of place that tried to trick your nervous system into feeling safe. Dr. Espinoza, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a calm voice, welcomed them with no judgment. She listened as Emily described the betrayal, the hospital, the birth. Her voice wavered but didn't break. Derek listened too, really listened, for the first time in what felt like years. When it was his turn to speak, his words were slow and measured. "I thought I could juggle both lives, that I could chase power without sacrificing the people I love. I was wrong. I lost sight of what mattered, And now, I just want to come home." Emily didn't speak right away. She just looked at him and realized that while the man in front of her bore the same face, something about him had shifted. The desperation in his voice wasn't for control, it was for forgiveness. She didn't offer it, not yet, but she came to the next session, and the one after that. They fought sometimes, messy, tear-grilled sessions that reopened wounds they both wanted to ignore, but they kept showing up, week after week. Lily became their anchor, the tiny heartbeat that reminded them why they were trying in the first place. One night, after putting Lily down in her crib, Emily walked out onto the balcony. The city glowed beneath her, silent and vast. She wrapped herself in a blanket and leaned against the railing. She didn't hear Derek come out until he draped a second blanket across her shoulders. "You'll catch a chill," he said. She looked over at him. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that came from work, but from the emotional labor of trying to rebuild something from splinters. "Thank you," she said softly. They stood together in silence for a while, just watching the city breathe. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted, "but I want to believe it's possible." His eyes searched hers. "So do I. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough, for now." The days after therapy began passed in a strange limbo between confrontation and quiet hope. Emily and Derek navigated the fragile in-between of what once was and what might still be, each session peeling back another layer of wounds they'd either buried or refused to acknowledge. Therapy didn't offer instant healing. It was messy, sometimes brutal, but it was honest, and that, for the first time in a long time, felt like progress. Meanwhile, Lily grew. She was now 6 weeks old, alert and demanding, with a pair of bright hazel eyes that reminded Emily too much of Derek. She cooed and kicked and screamed her way through sleepless nights, becoming the center of their universe. And in that new orbit, Derek tried to find his place. He still slept in the guest room, still asked permission before stepping into Emily's space. But he was present. In every diaper change, every late-night bottle, every exhausted trip to the pediatrician. He asked questions. He listened. He put his phone away when he was with them. These weren't grand gestures. They were the small, slow acts of rebuilding. They mattered. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because even as Derek tried to right his wrongs, the consequences of his choices refused to disappear. It started with a letter delivered by courier one stormy Tuesday afternoon. The envelope was thick, crisp, and bore a seal embossed with a gold L, the emblem of Vanessa Loring's family office. Derek had just finished rocking Lily to sleep when he opened it. Emily stood nearby folding laundry on the nursery dresser, watching the shift in his expression as he read the letter's contents. He went pale. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low. He held the letter out to her with a trembling hand. She read it slowly. Vanessa was threatening legal action. She claimed that Derek had made verbal promises regarding equity and exclusivity in Carter Tech's upcoming development fund. She was prepared to sue for breach of trust, misrepresentation, and damages exceeding $2 million. She also mentioned her intention to publicly clarify their relationship if he did not respond within 5 business days. "She's bluffing," Derek said, though his voice lacked conviction. "She's bitter because I cut her off. She knows a lawsuit would destroy my image, tank investor confidence. She's trying to blackmail me." Emily handed the letter back, her pulse steady. "Is anything she wrote true?" He hesitated. "Some of it. I never signed anything, but I let her believe we were building something permanent. Professionally, Emily didn't flinch. And now she wants payment for being your mistress. Derek's shoulders sagged. Something like that. For a long moment, Emily said nothing. Then she reached for her phone. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Calling my lawyer." Derek blinked. "You have a lawyer?" "I do now." Her voice wasn't cruel, just calm, clear, the kind of clarity that comes when survival stops being reactive and becomes intentional. That evening, the penthouse was quiet. Lily slept soundly in her crib, and Emily stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching lightning flicker behind the buildings across the city. Derek joined her after pacing the hallway for nearly half an hour. He said nothing at first, just stood beside her, his reflection in the glass almost as uncertain as hers. "I never imagined it would come to this," he said finally. "That she'd go this far." Emily didn't turn to face him. "You gave her the power. You let her in." He sighed. "I thought I could handle it, keep the boundaries clear, use her connections without giving her control." "You always thought you were invincible," she murmured, "even when I was drowning." He looked at her then, the regret in his face deep and hollow. "I don't want to lose you. Or Lily." "Then stop reacting like you're a victim in a mess you created," she said quietly, "and start acting like someone who's ready to fight for his family." The next morning, Derek met with his legal team. He returned home late in the afternoon, face drawn, shoulders tight. "She's serious?" he said, sitting across from Emily in the kitchen. "But we found leverage. Her claims are flimsy at best. She never invested $1 officially, no signed agreements, and he paused. "And what?" "We discovered she's been funneling money from her father's foundation into private accounts under shell companies. If we press, it won't end well for her." Emily raised an eyebrow. "So blackmail her back?" "No," he said quickly. "We won't use it, but it's there, and it gives us breathing room." Emily leaned back in her chair. "Good. Now what?" "I'm going to issue a formal statement, clarify everything, full transparency, no spin." "And you're ready for the fallout?" "I don't care about fallout anymore," he said. "Not if it means protecting you and Lily." The statement went public 2 days later. It was direct and emotionless. A corporate version of a confession. Derek acknowledged the inappropriate relationship, took responsibility for miscommunication, and announced that Carter Tech was reviewing all partnerships to ensure ethical standards. The media feasted. Headlines exploded. Millionaire CEO caught between mistress and motherhood drama. Vanessa Loring responds to Derek Carter's cowardly statement. Hints at more reveals. Carter Tech's empire on the brink. Emily didn't read the articles. She didn't need to. The buzz reached her anyway, in whispers during her postnatal yoga class, in awkward texts from former friends who hadn't spoken to her in months, in the nervous glance of the doorman as she walked past with Lily in her stroller. Derek spent most of the week in back-to-back meetings. His legal team was working overtime, and the PR firm he hired advised him to avoid further public comment. When he came home one night, nearly midnight, Emily found him asleep on the couch, still wearing his suit, Lily's baby monitor clutched in his hand. She stood over him for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the furrow between his brows even in sleep. And for the first time since the night she went into labor, she felt something unexpected, sympathy. Not forgiveness, but the faintest crack in her armor. Ah. The next morning he was up early, pacing the living room with Lily in his arms, whispering to her softly. Emily stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them. "She slept almost 4 hours," he said with a smile. "I think we're getting the hang of it." Emily smiled faintly. "She likes movement. I think she likes your voice more." They stood in silence for a beat before he cleared his throat. "I booked a couples session for Friday. I'd really like for you to come." She didn't answer right away. Then finally she said, "Okay." Friday arrived, and with it, the next step in their emotional dissection. Dr. Espinosa welcomed them in with her usual calm, inviting them to speak freely. Emily talked about the fallout, the headlines, the humiliation of being turned into tabloid fodder. Derek talked about fear of failure, of not being enough, of hiding behind ambition because it made him feel powerful, in ways love never could. It was the first time Emily heard him say those words aloud, and something inside her softened, not because it excused anything, but because it meant he was finally being honest with himself. When they got home that night, Emily poured herself a glass of water and sat on the couch beside him. "I'm still angry," she said. "I know, and I still don't know if I can ever trust you fully again. I understand. But—" She paused. "I see you trying, and I'm not ready to walk away." Derek exhaled, his eyes wet with relief. "Thank you." They didn't kiss. They didn't hold hands. But they sat there, side by side, the air between them no longer thick with tension, but with possibility. For the first time in months, Emily let her head rest on his shoulder, and he didn't move. They simply stayed like that, quiet, steady, two people trying to navigate love after ruin, not chasing what they once had, but learning how to build something new, brick by brick, breath by breath, together. 1 year had passed since Emily Carter gave birth alone in that cold, sterile hospital room. A year since she clutched her newborn daughter in trembling arms while her husband stood somewhere else in the same building, holding the hand of another woman. And yet, here they were, one humid summer afternoon, standing shoulder to shoulder at Lily's first birthday party, surrounded by pink balloons, half-melted cupcakes, and the delighted squeals of toddlers. Their friends had gathered in cautious support, family filtered in and out of the backyard garden, and Lily, now walking with a toddler's wobbly pride, toddled from guest to guest with sticky fingers and cake-smeared cheeks. Emily wore a soft floral sundress, her hair loosely pinned, a gold locket resting above her heart, the one with Lily's photo inside. Derek stood beside her, less polished than he used to be, sleeves rolled up, a touch of gray showing at his temples. He no longer carried himself with the overconfident swagger of a man trying to control every room. He carried himself like a man trying to earn his place in one. "She's the star of the show," Derek said quietly, watching Lily giggle as she tried to shove an entire strawberry into her mouth. Emily smiled faintly. She knows it too. He glanced at her, cautious, measuring the moment. "Thank you for letting me be part of this." Emily didn't look at him. She was still learning how to trust again, not with her mind, but with her heart. "You've shown up for her every day this year. That counts for something." And it did. After the whirlwind of lawsuits, headlines, and emotional reconstruction, What remained between them wasn't the fragile glass of a fairy tale marriage, but something more grounded, more real. Their reconciliation hadn't come with a kiss or a dramatic reunion. It came with diapers changed at 3 a.m., with Derek standing in pediatrician waiting rooms, holding Lily's hand while Emily filled out forms. It came with counseling appointments, awkward silences, and evenings where they cried across from each other and admitted they didn't have all the answers. But the work was paying off, slowly. Derek had taken a step back from Carter Tech, handing more control to his board, focusing instead on parenting and damage control. The company weathered the Vanessa Loring scandal, in part because Derek had taken full responsibility, and in part because Alicia's legal threats eventually fizzled when their lawyers uncovered financial misconduct on her end. She had disappeared from headlines shortly after. The business had stabilized, but the marriage, that was still a work in progress. After Lily's guests left, after the last balloon deflated and the backyard was cleared of crumbs and discarded wrapping paper, Emily stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Derek sit cross-legged on the floor with their daughter in his lap. He read aloud from a picture book, his voice soft and animated, Lily's tiny fingers grasping his thumb like she never wanted to let go. Emily leaned against the frame, silent. He looked up, sensing her there. "She's down to 2 naps a day now. You believe that?" "She's growing fast," Emily replied. "Faster than I expected." He smiled. "I keep thinking about that night, the night she was born, how I almost missed it completely." Emily folded her arms. "You didn't almost miss it, Derek. You did miss it." His face dropped slightly. He nodded. "I know. And every time I watch her sleep, I think about that. What it cost. What I cost." Emily walked into the room slowly, lowering herself to sit beside him. "She doesn't remember," she said. "But I do." "I don't expect you to forget," he said. "I just want to keep proving that I'm not that man anymore." Lily, still clutching his thumb, let out a tired coo. Emily reached over and smoothed a hand across her daughter's hair. "I think you've done a lot of that already," she admitted. "I see the effort, I see the change, and I see how much you love her." He turned toward her, hopeful but tentative. "What about you? Do you see any hope for us?" Emily didn't answer right away. She looked down at their daughter, then back at the man who had broken her, then fought like hell to become worthy of standing beside her again. "I see the possibility," she said, "but I need more than parenting together. I need a partner I can lean on, trust with everything. I need to know that if life breaks again, you won't run or lie or hide behind your ambition." "I won't," he said, voice low and raw. "Not ever again." A beat of silence passed. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. Just for a moment. A quiet acknowledgement of how far they'd come. How far they still had to go. 3 months later, they started wearing their wedding rings again. Not because everything was fixed, but because they had rebuilt enough to begin again, on firmer ground, with eyes wide open. Emily returned to work part-time, launching a home-based consulting firm for women-owned startups. She found purpose again, outside of diapers and bottles. Derek adjusted, supporting her career the way she once supported his, stepping in for daycare pickups, making dinner when she was buried in emails. Lily blossomed under their care. A bright, curious girl who loved splashing in the bathtub and babbling at the birds outside her window. Her laughter filled the apartment with warmth that once seemed unreachable. The three of them took weekend walks to the park, visited museums, built their own rhythm. Of course, there were still hard days. Nights when Emily would wake from a dream of that hospital room, breathless with the weight of the memory. Days when Derek looked at her and wondered if her silence meant regression. But they talked through it. They didn't hide from it anymore. The pain had become part of the foundation, not a weakness, but a testament to what they'd survived. Then, one evening, just before Lily's second birthday, Derek found Emily in the nursery again. She was watching their daughter sleep, one hand resting lightly on the railing of the crib. He stood beside her, silent for a long time. Then he knelt. Emily turned, startled. "Derek?" He looked up at her, tears in his eyes. "I know I've already made 1,000 promises, but I want to make one more, on my knees, where I should have been a long time ago." "Derek, let me ask again, Emily," he said softly. "Not because I forgot the first time, but because I want to do it right this time. Not as the man who thought he had it all, but as the one who almost lost everything and learned what love really is." He pulled out a simple gold band, hers, the one she had stopped wearing months ago. "I don't want to start over," he said. "I want to move forward. With you. As partners, as parents, as people who fought like hell to stay standing. Will you keep choosing me the way I'll keep choosing you, every day, no matter how hard it gets?" Emily's breath hitched. She looked down at him, this man who had once shattered her, and realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She reached out, took the ring, and slid it onto her finger. "I'll choose us," she said, voice steady. "But only if we never pretend again. No lies, no secrets, no half versions of ourselves. Never again," he whispered. He stood and she pulled him into an embrace. One filled not with fantasy, but with forgiveness, resilience, and truth. And as Lily stirred in her crib behind them, sighing in her sleep, they held each other in the quiet glow of a life they'd fought to rebuild. Not perfect, but real. And in the end, that was more than enough. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this emotional journey. Emily and Derek's story wasn't just about betrayal or heartbreak. It was about the strength it takes to face our deepest wounds, to grow beyond them, and to rebuild something real. In life, trust can be broken, love can be tested, but with honesty, patience, and genuine effort, healing is possible. Sometimes the hardest battles lead to the strongest bond. We hope this story touched your heart and reminded you that no matter how dark the moment, light can still break through. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you want to continue exploring powerful, real-life stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. More gripping tales of resilience, redemption, and love are coming your way. Until next time, take care. And remember, second chances can be real if you're brave enough to fight for them.